I have an idea.
What's your idea?
How generally aware do you think the average person is? Like, of themselves? Self awareness. How generally self aware do we think they are? Both, like, physically, like what they're doing at any given time, emotionally, mentally, like how keyed into their own experience do we think the average person is?
Well, I feel like this is definitely a very therapist-y question. This is
It's
very
actually
much...
not, because the reason I thought it was because I was talking to my friend this morning while we were pulling out a power washer to wash our homes, and he was talking about how there was this person driving down the road the other day when he was coming home who was going about 30 miles an hour through like a 45, and he had a lot of time.
It's like I have no context for what this
Yeah,
is. That
through a
fast?
45, and
Through a house.
through a home, and he's like, did he even know he was doing that? And he was just like, what is this person's, like, what are they doing right now? Are they like really self-aware and they're like, I have to drive slow because something's happening? Or were they just like for 20 minutes just totally in a bubble while they were kind of piecing out down the road? And then how often, like my follow-up to that was, how often is our life impacted by like the just blanket unawareness of a human being?
Well, in my general opinion, I have always said, specifically to Anna, to my wife, I have said that I think self-awareness is like the primary virtue, if you call it a virtue, I don't know what you call it.
I will.
That that people are missing just in life, and I think it manifests in 100 different ways. Obviously, you can drive poorly, but I think like, I just I think obviously I haven't thought about this ahead of time, so I don't have great concrete examples that are leaping to mind. But I think all the time about like people that are always switching jobs, they just don't know what they want to do, or they just sort of. So we've talked about this before. Um, the thing that my wife played music with this guy, and she thought he was a jerk, and was like, I don't like this guy, whatever. And then I met him, and I was like, had a blast talking to him for like an hour. I didn't even talk that much, but he was just a guy who was interested in music, and he had thoughts about it, and he had thought about it at all. And I feel like I'm constantly running into people who just have no thoughts on anything. Or maybe they'll be like, I like this, it's like the Ringer joke. It'll be like, name a movie. They'll be like, Mad Max Fury Road. That's a great movie. I'll be like, yeah, I liked it. They're like, yeah. Ha ha. I just feel like I'm constantly encountering
What did you
people.
like?
So even if somebody's a jerk, as long as they're like interested in something and can speak about it with any sort of either passion or intelligence, I just find that to be extremely rare. So I don't know. I think people are, at least in that sense, they could use a mindful puzzle. Not
He's
really.
pointing to something on a shelf that you
Yeah.
can't see, so it's gonna be lost on everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I'm not supposed to clear my throat because it'll create audio spikes.
No, I adjusted. I'm pretty.
Never
much
mind.
the
That was
best
a
audio.
very unimportant non sequitur.
Actually, I can see that mine spiked at some point. I got a little warning.
yeah.
Damn it!
Jordan just gets so excited he spikes the
I'm so
audio.
passionate.
Yeah. I mean, so it comes up a lot in my life as a therapist, which I'm not gonna talk about that part as much. But I've become just kind of really aware of how often I'll like do something, and then something will, most of the time it's just inconvenience, or it's just kind of like you see it happen and you're like, ugh. So for example, we have a mutual person that we know from college who is really trying to make a career in music.
Oh.
And he, I think, is one of the primary examples of what I mean when I'm like, how self-aware is this person?
Right.
Because they have an album on Spotify that they self-produced, and they've been working towards a music career for, I mean, we haven't actively participated in this process, but observationally, like 10 years?
Yeah, well, presumably
Since
college, yeah.
Yeah, so it has been on and off. His his primary focus. But right now he's hitting it hard. And he's not talented. Like, he's just not physically good at making appealing. Like, he can't make the noises that sound nice is a part of it. And there's other and lots of things,
yeah,
but
he is uniquely not gifted. I mean, he sucks at singing, but he also sucks at he clearly is unaware of pitch. His rhythm is crazy, just like he's never heard what a song sounds like. Mm-hmm. In the sense that it's sort of like a jumble of words that he had already written have to spill out in a certain thing, but he doesn't know how to.
It's like, I've got 30 seconds to get all these words out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, in interacting with it, there is a part of it where the conversation can turn very mean, because it is unpleasant to listen to. But the part that I think is so unique about it is that he needs a livelihood. Like, it's not like I've got extra time, extra money. Like, this is just a passion project for funsies, or like he's making worship music. And I know a big part of why he's doing it is because he feels this call to worship, and that's cool. I respect that.
Sure.
But it's the fact that it's like he'll make a Facebook post of a snippet of a song, being like, hey, do you guys like bonfires and s'mores and Christian music? Because that's what my music sounds like. And I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want... if that's what those things combined are, no, thank you.
Sounds more like the flushing of a toilet.
Yeah. And then, which is when we get mean, right?
No.
But then, like, the next post will be like, oh, I've got my third child on the way. Like, we can't pay our bills with two. Like, God will provide. And I'm like,
do you think we have any patrons that will know who this is?
I don't know.
Kevin, are you listening?
Kevin, you will know, probably. But, like, it's just kind of, there's this very intense, I feel, lack of awareness.
Yeah.
For the fact that it's not... There are musicians who are wildly talented who just can't catch a break. Like, the right person hasn't heard it yet, or there are factors that make it to where, how do you get to a wider audience? But then we have this guy who...
Well, and I think there are also mediocre musicians who understand either that they're not going to make it anyway because they can't hack it, or they recognize they got to be good at some other element of it, like their TikTok star, or whatever. They're like good at the business side of it or something like that. Mm-hmm. There are people that, but he has the unique ability of being one of the worst I've ever heard, but also one of the most constantly like posting, do you understand how good this is? The reels where he'll play his own music while he makes coffee and knowingly nods at the camera like, isn't this dope? And then also the like not getting a real job in the meantime, or any job that I can tell, and then also complaining the whole time. So it's like this weird confluence of like, I should be doing better because I'm great. I'm not going to do anything else in the meantime because that would maybe take away from how great I am. And also just like constantly whining that the universe or his friends or whatever, like nobody's giving him his shot. It's like this weird, it's like all the negative ways you could do this. As opposed to, we have some other friends from college. There's one guy in particular who we always thought was not very talented, but he just keeps plugging away, but he has like a job and he just does stuff on the side. I don't think he thinks he's going to be a rock star anymore. And then we have another friend who is relatively talented and is doing a lot of good stuff, but is also smart about like getting sure that like the branding is right. And, he's like picked up a whole second career as a graphic designer to learn other skills that will help him in this thing and whatever. Anyway, this guy's got none of that.
he's got nothing going on, guys.
Well, he will. So just as an example of that, he has before asked like, what's, I want to get better at graphic design, because it is something he actually is not terrible at, kind of coming up with graphics and stuff. And he's like, what are you supposed to do? And people will give him advice, and they'll be like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, what do you want other than to just be successful by willing it into existence? Because that's hard, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there comes the point in this conversation too, where it's like, for people who lack that kind of self-awareness, at what point do the bystanders have a responsibility to help to impose a little awareness on them, right? So like, and I would imagine it has something to do with the level of potential harm to others or to self that they might be enduring in that.
Yeah.
But like I even have this kind of conversation with my wife with when it comes to like our kids, where it's like, at what point do you have a conversation, like with my son, he's probably the youngest person in his grade. So I have not broached this at all, but like when we were looking at his scores, just, for math and reading and stuff, right? To him, he came home and he's like, I did this and it was amazing. And I was like, great, because I just care that he wants to try and cares about learning, and so cool. But then when you actually look at the scores, it's like, okay, well, he's a little bit below average in reading, which I immediately was like, he's a year younger than everybody else, just give him time. But then, like, at what point in this process does he come home and he's like, I'm a really great reader, and he's, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, and you go, actually, bud, you're not. Like, and it, like, but you could read more and get better, right? Like, you could practice more and you could do this more. Like, you can approach this differently and be better, right? Or like with sports, I just, I think we've all met the person who's just kind of similar to the guy we were talking about with music, where it's like, well, I'm really like, I'm good at this and I should be allowed to be on this team. Like, I should make the high school team. I should be on the all-star team. Like, why am I not? And it's like, well, you're just not as good as other people are.
Right.
And reasonably, right? Especially with kids, they can get better by practicing or by like working with someone who can help them with technique and things like that. But like, there does come a point where it's like, well, part of the reason you're bad at this is because you're bad at this. Like, you're just not as athletic as the next person, or, you're not as like, I think intelligence is something that people get like really up in arms about, but it is just objectively true that there are ranges in intelligence and things like that. And so like, at what point do we kind of have a conversation with somebody where it's like, maybe you're not intelligent enough to do this, or fast enough, or whatever it might be.
I think one of the best ways to maybe approach that is less about getting them to accept the shortcomings in a certain area, and more about finding the areas in which they are gifted and excel, and doing and sort of pushing those, if that makes sense. So like, it depends. Like, if your son is just not reading at a level that he needs to, then I mean, you're probably going to have to work on that for whatever reason. Although it is interesting in that case, because it's like, well, is he reading at a level that's appropriate to him, like regardless of his specific peers? Because that's kind of its own. But also, like with our friend, I almost said his name, like, he's not even a friend at this point. I haven't talked to him in 10 years. But it's kind of like, what you would want is somebody in his life, not necessarily just shitting on his terrible music, but saying, man, you are so good at, let's say, graphic design. What if you pursued in this? Or even, I have an opportunity in this. That would be an ideal scenario. And maybe I can help you with that. Or like, what if we did more with that? And trying to steer them somewhere, because this has weirdly become mostly about like skills and stuff. I think there's a lot of other things that we can be lacking in self-awareness. But there's an article in The Atlantic, I think it was probably by Arthur C. Brooks, who's like their happiness correspondent. Anyway, I like him a lot. But he had said something to the effect of, the best way to find job satisfaction is not getting a cool job. It's not getting a fun job. It's something that you find interesting, that you want to constantly learn about, and it's something that you're already or will be competent in. Those actually lead to much more job satisfaction than having the cool job, right? I think this is a thing that people just don't believe, which is like, everybody now wants to be a YouTuber, right? That's like broadly every kid. That's like the number one thing. Gen Z and below is like, if I get to pick my career, I want to be a YouTuber. But the problem is, and I hope nobody feels called out by this, but I will get people all the time that are saying, "Hey man, I'm making a video. I want you to look at it," or whatever. And I'll be like, "Great, that's fine, cool. Happy to give feedback." They never send the video, and then they'll show up 6 months later and they'll be like, "Working on it, whatever. I'm gonna make the video. I'm gonna send the video." I'm like, "Okay, I'm excited to see it." And the thing is, like, if I knew them in real life, I'd say, "I don't think you're interested in this," or you might be bad at it. But either way, it's like, you need to find the things that you're already kind of drawn to and doing and you find interesting, because to be a successful YouTuber is like, it's not just, I like to make silly videos with my friends. You have to give a crap about the thumbnails and the analytics and all this crap that's really not sexy fun. It's the same with music, I think. The people that succeed in music are not just like sitting there all day shredding on the guitar. But even then, they're probably the kind of person that's going to get to, we got to learn about songwriting. We got to learn about how to like save money, because we don't freaking make any money doing this out the gate. And all this stuff. It's just like every job that seems sexy and cool has so many unsexy, lame parts about it that are hard. And if you don't have competency and if you don't have interest in all of it, it's kind of like, I think Jason Pargin had something where he's like, if you want to look like The Rock, but you don't want to go to the gym really, then you don't actually want to look like The Rock, because The Rock The Rock wants to go to the gym, and he freaking does. And he actually made a point in that same thought, which is like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, in that documentary, pumping weights to him feels like orgasming or something. At least that's what he claims. And it's like, he is gonna be big because to him it feels very different than how it feels to you and I. I'm like, I don't feel that at all. I hate this. But he's like, no, this is best feeling. And so it's just kind of like, I think, I wish more people were told that it's like, you could be really, really satisfied as an accountant if you have an aptitude for it and you're just kind of interested in numbers. Like, you don't have to, like, what do you even want from being a YouTuber? That's the thing that I think people want to get into, because if it's like, it's a fun job, it's like, yeah, but it's still a freaking job. It sucks to have like your actual financial stability tied to something fun that you're doing.
The whims of the unwashed masses.
Well, that too, but I just mean, it's like, it's tough to be like, I don't know, I'm watching this movie. I just watched Furiosa with a notepad in my hand, writing things down, and it definitely dampens it. And then I have to go home and I have to write about it, and then I'm gonna have to go riff on it, and it's like, there's a lot of that's really fun. But there's also a big part of me that also is sitting there going, this freaking Mad Max video is going to bomb. I just know it is, because Indiana Jones bombed. This is like the same kind of thing. It's just like, people are like, oh yeah, I love those. But like, you don't care. You're not searching for Mad Max in the way that like horror nerds are like, what's going on in Halloween? I want to see 400 videos about Halloween. And I just know it's going to bomb, and I wish I didn't care. But I'm like, ugh, I'm putting all this effort into this fun thing. That's gonna freaking bomb.
Well, every time I tell anybody what you do professionally, you're one of my favorite people to talk about what you do professionally, because everybody's like, that's a thing? Or like, I'll be like, oh yeah, he makes these recap videos, and he's like, well, how does he have to watch them all? And I'm like, yes, he recaps them
slowly and painfully.
With a notepad. And they're every single person without fail. I think there's been one person who'd be like, that sounds cool. Everybody else goes, that sounds grueling, like just well, it is terrible. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And it's actually like, it's fun to watch the videos with you when you do it, because it's just fun to see your process. But at the same time, there's this part of it where it's like, you don't get to enjoy, like, just sit and enjoy a movie without like analyzing it and riffing on it. Like, even in the moment, like, I remember the last movie we went to see, we're like sitting with your notepad and you just like started laughing to yourself because you're like, this joke's gonna be hilarious. And it was a funny joke. But at the same time, it was just like you're always kind of like moving in and out of I'm watching this thing while doing this thing while watching this thing. And it, as a profession, it's just kind of like you're taking what other people use to unplug and you're just constantly analyzing it, which going back to the aptitude and things, like you've always been good at that and you enjoy it. So it's like, it's, less kind of emotional labor, I think, for you to do that than it might be for some other people. But it is still very time consuming and hard. And I think a lot of people who watch it who are like, oh, I'd love to do what you do, don't necessarily understand that it's like actually a large part of your job is taking something that people really love to just enjoy and breaking it down and kind of resynthesizing it so that you can create something else that someone else will enjoy.
Right.
And it's
well,
just
like,
exhausting.
I thought about something similar to this where yesterday I watched, well, not yesterday, I watched it on Friday, I guess, but I watched Hellraiser 6, Hellseeker. And
how was it?
It was not, it was really boring and dumb, but I was like, oh, this is going to be great because, like, later, because it's, the Allstate commercials with the Mayhem guy. Mm-hmm. Or Liz Lemon's boyfriend.
Yeah, of course.
He's the lead.
Oh, nice.
And so I wrote, oh, it's like an Allstate commercial. And then he drives off a bridge, and I was like, oh, it's like
Beautiful.
So perfect.
It writes itself.
But that's the first 4 minutes of the movie. And then I was like, I just got to watch him. Like, basically, the whole movie is him waking up. Just constantly. He wakes up in his office. He wakes up in all these things. And it's funny to describe it to you. And it will be funny to see me talk about it in the video, I hope. But, man, it was so freaking boring to watch. And, like, I'm having to pause so much because I'm like, timestamp 40 minutes. He wakes up in his office. Timestamp 43 minutes. He wakes up in the police station. Timestamp 47 minutes. He wakes up at the acupuncturist's. His coworker's like, this will help. And he hands him a number. And I was like, what is this, like a therapist? Oh, it's an acupuncturist? What? Anyway, I guess because of Pinhead and he pokes things. But what I was going to say is, you're right. I have found that I'm good at this specific thing. But what I've always wanted to do is I wanted to be our friend and play music. I love music. I would much rather be a guitarist, but I'm not as good at that. And I'm not as interested in that. And I'm not as sold out as some of our other friends. And I still that's why I'll work it into videos. I'll write a song about leprechauns or whatever. But, like, ultimately, the thing that I spent the first, half of my career trying to do, thinking I was going to do, I just wasn't good enough at it. And I wasn't interested enough in it. And it was still easier, in some sense, than what I'm doing now. But also, like, nobody cared and nobody liked it. And I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think about that too. It's like, so I guess my question for you is, why therapy specifically? As not that, it's kind of the funny thing too, where it's like, how did you pick being a YouTuber? I was like, I don't know. That's like the only thing that seemed to work. I don't know. I've tried things and I don't have any like good degrees or skills. I just, it's working. So I'm doing that. Mm-hmm. It's fun, but why therapy versus, you came in as a SMAD major?
I never actually made it that far.
Oh, okay.
I got too scared to do the entry stuff you're supposed to do for SMAD.
Yeah, so James Madison University has a major called School of Media Arts and Design, SMAD. And is that what you came in as, though?
I declared that I was going to try to get into it.
Did you even take 101? Okay. But, like, to me, like, that's what I should have done. I also I came in as a SMAD major. I took 101, and then they wanted a portfolio, and I was like, I give up. I'm going to do English or something. Or music. Actually, what I did was then I started doing more music stuff because that's what I thought I was going to do. I'm like, I'm better at music and English than I am at video stuff, ironically.
Very ironic.
Then you did business?
Yep. I literally failed the entry-level math, like the college intro to calculus and basic math.
Is this intro to calculus?
Yeah, I was just like, where am I? I literally remember I showed up to the exam and was like, I don't actually know anything. Like, I had my little blue book, and I was just like, I want to cry. Like, I just don't know anything. It was the only class I've ever straight failed, ever.
Yeah.
Like 40%. Like, tried so hard and could not math. My brain doesn't math. So then I was like, well, business is not for me.
Yeah.
So then business, and then went to psychology because we have a friend, James Blanks, who is a dog with a bone. It's the only way to describe him. When he wants something, he's just gonna like, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And so
never heard that.
I was
metaphor.
like, yeah, it's a good one.
I don't like it.
It's a good one. This dog has a huge bone.
Okay.
And so I was like walking to change my major, and he just happened to be there, and he's like, oh, do psychology. Like, you should do it. Oh my gosh, you should do it. Like, I'm doing it, and you should do it, and we should do this together, and we'll be in classes forever, and we'll be best friends. And I'm like, James, you got to bring it down like 15 notches, because at that point, me and James actually didn't know each other at all. It was like he was our friend's sweet mate, and he just happened to run into me. It was like, we're doing this, and we're going to become best friends.
Our friend's fencing partner.
Yeah, right. And so I was just like, whatever, man. I don't know. Like, I'll change it to that. And now I'm a therapist, and me and James are really good friends. So thank you for your persistence. But like,
Thanks, James.
thanks,
Friend of the pod.
friend of the pod.
Actually, I don't even think he's a patron. He's not a friend of the pod. You suck, James.
But James is always very interested in what we're doing, which I always have appreciated about him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's this. It's been this winding road. But specifically, like, why a therapist? I took like the counseling 101 class. And one of the things that they constantly were talking about was like, oh, like empathy, and like, oh, unconditional positive regard, right? Which is like this idea is like, whoever comes and sits across from me, you have to believe that deep down inside, they want good things. Like, they're an okay person who wants the same okay things that everybody else wants, and we just need to like sit and see them that way and not find them to be a terrible person, which for the vast majority of people is good, like decently easy to do, because once you sit down and actually talk to a person, like, you know, it's doable. But the thing that like in therapy that I found fascinating and pushed me, but I also felt very good at it, was like doing that with people that it's really hard to do that for. So like sitting down across from a person who's like, I'm in the KKK. It's like, oh.
Like, well, you had a lot of empathy because you also are in the KKK.
Well, yeah. I mean, so that's not the hard part. The hard part is trying to talk him out of it. No, so like
to get him promoted to king, whatever,
to the
Grand Duke,
the wizard or whatever. Yeah, no. So like, but there are people who come in who just are objectively doing things that I find objectionable, and being like, okay, well, what does it look like to see this person as a person who's like trying to be good? Like they're working towards something. And I just very quickly found out like I'm pretty good at doing that. And that's why I'm, you know, where I am. But then like it kind of ties into what I've decided I think is the chief goal of therapy, which is like
money.
Is money. Second to that is self-awareness, which is just kind of this idea of like, I think so many people float through life not knowing what they're good at and why they do what they do, and you know, all this stuff. And I actually am not a huge proponent of like, oh, it's because your mom or your upbringing or all this stuff. I think that shapes why you do what you do, but at the end of the day, I think people do what they do because they value things, like they care about things, or they don't care about other things, and they might have been told by a parent or a friend or a whoever, like, oh, you should do this, or oh, this is a more admirable profession, or this is a more appropriate choice for you to make. But like, to me, I think the main goal of therapy is actually sitting people down and taking an accurate inventory of what do you actually care about and what are you good at and what kind of people do you like, and then just surrounding yourself with things that actually make you functional. And like I don't like the goal to be like the goal to be happy, but I think if you're good at things, and I think if you feel competent and you are living meaningfully and you're doing that, I think the byproduct of that is being happy. Not always, but I think that you are going to be happier more often than not if you're doing meaningful things with people that you care about with a job you're good at.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, so I just think that's a really kind of important part of it. But part of, I think, what my job is, well, not all therapists agree with this, but I think part of my job is being able to be like, actually, you're not good at this, right? That's part of why, going back to the friend that kind of kickstarted this conversation, I really want to sink my teeth into him professionally, because I'm just like, why do you think you're good at this? Like, what about this do you feel like you're really good at? And what are you pursuing in this, and what's going on? Because I have so much intellectual curiosity for what drives this person's behavior. But I do think fundamentally it's rooted in this like huge lack of self-awareness.
Right.
And so, kind of going back to your idea of like this chief virtue of awareness, I think that that's something that I care a lot about professionally.
Yeah, and I think, well, the reason that I always said it was yeah. I mean, I think you find a lot of frustrated, like disaffected people because they aren't pursuing things that interest them or things they're good at. Exactly. They don't even know what those things are. They are pursuing, to your point, either things they've been told they should be pursuing, which a lot of times is like a certain amount of money, or they're pursuing things like just sort of this like consuming constant entertainment forever with no regard for it. Just sort of like, I don't know, I like video games, so I'm going to play Minecraft until I throw up. And it's sort of, it bleeds out into a lot of other things. We have another mutual friend who well, actually, we've had several friends that I call like they live on these pendulums where they're like, I'm going sober and I will only drink coffee and be super kind or whatever, and then like the next day they're puking in our shared room in the house because they took Percocets with alcohol, and I was like underage, and just this kind of like what are you even interested? Like they're just sort of like, I'm gonna try and be really good. I can't hack it. But I want to. And I'm like, just stop living on that spectrum and start picking like just something that you care about. And it's clearly not just like not doing Percocets or something.
Not parachuting perkies, because that's the life, dude.
I don't know. I just think, or I have this other friend who, they were a teacher, and then they quit dramatically because they couldn't hack it for whatever reason. The school got super pissed, as you can imagine, just sort of like quitting in the middle of the year. Then they decided they were a great teacher. They constantly tell me what a great teacher they were. So they had to spend 3 years in teacher hell, working their way back up as like a teaching assistant, whatever. Finally got another teaching position, quit in the middle of the year, burned out, pissed everyone off. They will never be a teacher again. And you're like, that's like 6 years of your life that you spent telling yourself what a great teacher you were, how much you cared about teaching, and you never even made it through a full school year because you clearly did not like it and or were bad at it. And just, I wish there was, it's funny because everybody thinks that my wife does what you do, but for jobs. She's an occupational therapist. Literally everybody's like, oh, interesting. And we're like, to be clear, it's like a physical therapist.
She teaches people to hold pencils.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a physical therapist. They do more gross motor. She does more fine motor. She'll teach you how to brush your teeth. But I do think that's sort of like a job market that we need more. And it's not just jobs. I mean, it's kind of like my wife. Back to my wife. She got a degree in occupational therapy because she does care about like old people and like making them happy. But specifically, she knew that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and she knew that occupational therapy is like very flexible and there's always a need and all that stuff. So she was sort of working towards the thing that she wanted, but keeping a realistic view of sort of like job markets and stuff like that. But she's just a stay-at-home mom, which our friend is a stay-at-home dad. Maybe that's what he should just do and just stop whining on Facebook about it and just accept that that's the lot or whatever. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. So I really think it's cool. We don't have a lot of friends with that have where the mom stays home, but and that's fine. But I really appreciate that my wife's doing it because that's all she's ever wanted to do, and she's great at it. She kicks ass, and I think it's awesome. But it's like, again, I wish more people. We know some people that are like angsty stay-at-home moms that are like, I'm here, but it's only because I have to because we can't afford whatever. And that's fine because sometimes that just happens. But I'm bummed that they're not able to find interest in it or whatever. A lot of people hate their kids. We can make that another one someday.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why do people hate their kids? I have an idea.
We'll that'll be a
stick
be
a pin in it,
tease
'cause
for a
that's-
future episode.
That is something we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then going back to that, right? There's a level of self-awareness in that where I think that, and we've kind of talked about this, like as a society, we'll like kind of push kids aside. And so people will just be like, I want to have kids. And there's like a level of self-awareness though, where it's like, have you spent any time with kids?
Yeah, do you want kids?
Yeah. Like, do you actually want them? Like what purpose does having kids have for you? Right. Question I ask in therapy, right? How does this serve you? Like, what is going on here?
Which feels like a really, on a surface level, feels like the exact wrong way to think about kids, or like a really selfish way to think about kids. But also, before you have kids, is probably a really smart way to think about it, because I don't think people, they're like, well, I don't know if they think about it at all, other than like, well, people have kids, so I should have kids. But it is kind of like a, my Anna and I, the reason I shield my Patreon, we make less money than most people our age where both parents work, obviously. And it's kind of like, we're just okay with that because this is what Anna wants to do, and we both want that to happen. Like, this is sort of the way that it works, and it's like, join my Patreon.
Yeah.
So we can make bad financial decisions
together
and not work. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So like when you look at it, like how does this serve you question, the way that it can serve a person is, I really value this. Like, I just really care about it. And I love kids, and I want to have kids, and I want to raise them so they can be awesome people. And so like how does this serve you question can be a selfless answer in some ways, where it's like,
well, sure,
I just care about this. But there are people who are like, well, I've had a lot of people that I've interacted with where it's like, well, you have to have kids. Like, either my parents told me that they want to have grandkids, or I have a religious obligation to create more people, more soldiers. It like we got to refill the ranks.
Yeah.
And but they don't like kids. Like, they don't care about kids, and they receive no personal satisfaction in raising kids. And it's all rooted in this lack of awareness. Like, there's just no self-awareness in that. And so, I
will say, I don't like kids.
Yeah.
But I like my kids a lot.
Yeah.
And I knew, or at least I was banking on the idea that I do love things like teaching. I like basically enough things about what it would mean to have kids, that even though I don't want to interact with anyone else's kids very much, I mean, I like some kids, but I just, in general, I'm not like seeking out kids. Which is good.
Yeah, that's great. I think most people would agree that it's good that you don't seek
If
out
a cop
children.
is listening to this, officially, I am not.
This is just for the FBI agent sitting in the parking lot right now.
Thank you for supporting my Patreon, FBI. Anyway, I felt self-aware enough to know that I would find it interesting. I didn't know if I would be any good at it, but I knew Anna was good at it. And I knew that she could help. And it turns out I both like it more than I expected and am better at it. And we also sort of did some things to kind of build opportunities for me to get good at it. So that's another thing, too. It's kind of like, again, with a friend who sucks at music, you want to ask him, like, what are you doing to be less sucky at music, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't just accept that you're just like, I'm just a prodigy. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
What I need is for all of you to accept that about me. Um, so we for the first from 3 months on, I have had all the kids by myself, like 3 months from our first kid being born, for really long, extended full days, whatever, all the time, which has just forced me to be competent because if they're screaming, I either have to figure out what to do on my own because there's no backup, or it's just hell for the rest of my life because
Mm-hmm.
I've refused to get any better at it. And so anyway, all that to say, I'm not like I just have found interest in it and competency in it, and I think anybody could
Mm-hmm.
with kids, but a lot of them just choose not to,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point in that too, where it's like the competency in something doesn't mean that you're necessarily always going to do it correctly.
Oh
It's
yeah.
the competency. I think a big part of competency is being able to actually analyze where you made a mistake and how you made a mistake and how to do it correctly next time.
Yeah.
Which once again is I think a huge part of competency is self-awareness. I mean, there is like prodigy level talent, right? That like
Which
you,
nobody
you
has.
kind of like, yeah, right? Like the tiny fraction of the population are just freak athletes or like just like think in music, right? They just music is all they know. The vast majority of people who are good at things because they're able to sit down, they're passionate about it enough to sit down and do it a lot. And then when they make a mistake, they can actually analyze the process and thoughtfully look at it and go, "Oh, this is what I did wrong.
Yeah.
Like my mistake was here." And then they change their behavior around that through repetition once again, like doing it over and over and over again.
Right, which is, I guess, actually, that's a really good way to think about it because I think that's where the interest piece comes in. Is like
Mhm.
one of the only reasons that I think I've been successful at any degree with both writing comedy articles and with making videos and stuff is pure volume, and then over time, seeing how much I suck. I mean, I've probably said this before, but for the first, I don't know, several dozen cracked articles that I wrote, what I would do is I would print out the draft that I wrote, like that I sent in, and then I would print out the final version that went up on the website, and I would see what they had changed because they don't tell you. It just gets posted and you get paid. And now they don't do anything like that. But this was back when it doesn't matter. And basically, I would say, oh, this joke was like way too long, way too involved, not funny enough. They shortened it, or they cut it entirely because you just don't need that many jokes to make whatever point you were trying to make, and just kind of constantly doing that. And then obviously, when I was in charge of the Crack YouTube channel, I would just sit there and look at the analytics all the time and just sort of be like, sometimes it's basic stuff. It was like, I've noticed that when we put a large-breasted woman in the thumbnail,
People do like the boobies.
our click-through rate is much higher than not. But that doesn't that it's not the surefire answer because you might get flagged by YouTube, you might get in trouble, and you might skew your audience so heavily male that it sort of like defeats a growth. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is, I was just constantly interested enough to make more of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
More
so,
boobs.
and I suppose there's a self awareness too that it's like these things don't have to define you. Like I think, I've been reading a lot of these books, like Rick Rubin's book and The War of Art, and all these other creativity books, and a lot of them are like, if a thing doesn't exist, it doesn't. You can't get any better. You can't do anything unless you put out something that maybe isn't perfect. I think a lot of people spend their whole lives like waiting until they're ready. Obviously, there are people that just shit stuff out, like our friend. So there's that too. But there are people that are like, I can't make anything until it's perfect, and it's like, well, then you'll never make anything, and it doesn't matter. If you want to make these things a job, you have to make things, even if they're not perfect. Mm-hmm. If you want it to be a hobby or like a whatever, then great. You treat it differently. Then I think people also, there's a self-awareness too of like, what is my interest in watching Transformers movies? Is it just to goof around and talk about it with my friends, or am I trying to make a career out of making fun of Transformers movies, because if so, that's a whole different animal.
It is.
Um,
And some of us just watch Transformers while we fold the laundry because we just don't want to feel anything.
right.
We just want to sit there and feel nothing.
And if that's what you want to do, then do that. Don't pretend that that's going to become a career someday.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that yeah, I think this skewed the conversation skewed a lot towards just what are we good at and what do we do, but I think that the thing that I've kind of landed on in my life is just I when I as far as how it like comes to like bringing awareness to what I'm doing is I just kind of constantly run things through the filter of, do I care about this enough to keep doing it over and over again? And then am I bringing enough self-awareness to it to actually analyze what I'm doing to get better at it? Because if I don't care about it enough to keep doing it over and over again, I probably need to stop doing it. Right, especially if it talks about like when we're talking about like as a profession.
Yeah, it depends on the thing.
But yeah, I mean, like as my hobbies go, I will do 1,000 different hobbies, and I don't care. I'm gonna own that. But like professionally, or like something that I'm going to invest a large, like parenting, right? Something I'm going to invest a large amount of my life in. I need to be passionate about it enough to keep doing it over and over again, and then
especially
which
if you're not
passion
use
is
condoms.
passion exactly, exactly. Passion is like a hard thing to cultivate, though. Right. Like, I tell people building motivation, building passion is really hard. But building self-awareness and like actually like being able to ask yourself the right questions about what you do is not as hard.
Right.
And so to me, finding things that I care about, but then being able to actually sit down and ask myself the question and answer honestly, am I any good at this? Like, what do I have to do to be better at it? Am I willing to do what one would need to take to be better at it?
Right.
Do I have realistic goals in this, right? Like, me and one of my neighbors have started lifting, right? I don't plan on looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I am not that level of passionate about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I've created goals that are kind of meaningful to me based on how much I care about it and how much I'm willing to try, right? But
sure.
But because I took an accurate look at it, I actually continue to lift now, and I do like it and I enjoy it. But I think the vast majority of the people who quit things that they start is because they overestimate how much they're going to care about it, and they underestimate or like don't bring in nearly enough awareness to actually like do the work of getting increasingly good at it.
This is almost a tangent, but it's related in the sense that I think it's also Arthur C. Brooks. But there was a point made somewhere where, or maybe not, basically numerical goals, hard goals, like clearly defined goals, almost always leave you empty and sad. It's much more effective to set broad goals. So like with lifting, your goal theoretically should be to feel better, be stronger, be healthier, and a lot less bench 180 or whatever. Because I mean, I don't know about in that specific scenario, because I guess you can keep pushing it, but they were talking about like academic goals. I want to be published in this many papers, and then you are, and then you're like, well, I feel empty inside, stuff like that. And I think that's one of the cool things about parenting, to sort of bring it back to that, is there's really not any hard goals that, like, I want my son to weigh 25 pounds. And so you're kind of forced to live nebulously. And I think it's a good sort of metaphor for how you should do things. Like, I'm constantly trying to check myself and recognize that my goal should not be to get 1 million views on a video. My goal should be to make videos that I like or think are good, and to constantly make better videos subjectively. Because if I'm constantly like, well, that video didn't make 1 million, it was a waste of my time. Like Mad Max is going to be a waste of my time from a goal building perspective of like, it's just not going to get the views. I just want it to be as good as it can be for my own, because I want to make good things. And that's a much more achievable goal, is, can I make good things that I like?
Yeah. Well, and kind of going back to, what I do in therapy with people, it ends up actually kind of needing to be a little bit of a combination of both, where the nebulous goals are ultimately the ones that I think are best once you've hit a certain point, right? So like
Sure.
when you're starting to lift, one of the things that actually really helps is lift the bar, right? Like with bench press, they tell you start at the bar
Yeah.
because you're going to do it. And if you can't, then there's always something lighter than the bar you can lift, right? But start with the bar and then tell yourself, I'm going to add 5 pounds next week.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do this. And, or in 2-3 days or whenever you decide to lift. And so like, there's kind of this like part of it where like with my clients, I'll be like, hey, you are sleeping in until 12 every day. 3 days a week, let's get up by 10.
Yeah.
Right. And setting those kind of concrete goals, I don't think leads to happiness or satisfaction. Right. But what it does is it creates kind of behavioral change that you can over time create habit out of. And then
Yeah.
but then also concrete goals give you the ability to actually start doing the analysis part, right? Because I tell people all the time, I actually don't care if you complete your goal or not.
Mm-hmm.
I care about you being able to come in and tell me exactly what you did or did not do that allowed you to not accomplish your goal,
Yeah.
right? So like if someone comes in and they go, well, I wasn't able to wake up at a meaningful time for myself. Like the goal we set didn't happen, right? If I go, well, okay, what were the obstacles to that? And they go, well, I don't know, right? Then that identifies a lack of self-awareness, which is something we need to build.
Right.
Versus if they go, well, I realized that I stayed up till 5 every night, and so I could not operate on 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Well, then that gives you something to work on and tweak. But like over time, the goals become more nebulous because it's like, you need to kind of move into meaning making more than just kind of checking the boxes.
Yeah.
But I think the checking the boxes is really important because that gives you a really good metric too for maybe I just am trying to do something I don't need to be doing. Like our friend who's doing the music, I think the concrete goal would be a really good marker for maybe you just need to stop, right? Like if you've been doing this for a year and you can't get more than 100 views on a video,
Yeah.
maybe you're just not creating something that people want to watch, or you're just doing this wrong and you're not being analytical enough to change what you're doing. So you need to pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good clarification. So like, I guess part of it is trying to not set goals that, it's not tying your happiness or your self-worth or whatever to what feel like, end goals. So like, if this, then, so it's a lot of, it's like, if this, then goals, the kind of like, if I win an Oscar, I'll have made it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you win an Oscar, and then you're like,
You need a Tony.
I need it, yeah,
Gotta
or
get
whatever.
that EGOT.
It's like the Jim Carreys and the Tom Brady's of the world who have gone on record being like, I thought when I achieved the thing, I would be happy, but maybe if I win another one. So that kind of stuff. So, but like the incremental goals to get to a thing, because I don't think in the examples you give, nobody's like, well, if I can lift the bar, then my life has meaning necessarily. But it's a working towards a thing. So yeah, definitely checklisty stuff is valuable. I just think it's the thing that I will find is, Ryan George had a video about how you feel before and after 1 million subscribers, and he's like, I don't know, the same, nothing.
I feel nothing.
Yeah, and so just trying to recognize that there are great benchmark goals, but if they are in isolation, if they are the whole point, you're not going to be very happy with that. Although, to your point, I never really thought about it from like maybe it's worth having benchmark goals to see if you suck at something.
Yep.
It's kind of an interesting. I mean, so when we started the YouTube channel, Anna and I didn't have a specific goal, but the idea was we said we'd give it a year. And if we were like dying financially, if we couldn't hang, then we would stop. And so that gave us at least like, if we're not good enough at it, then we need to pivot to something. And it ended up after the first year that we were doing okay, so we kept it going. But kind of keeping those things in mind of I shouldn't just try to be a YouTuber again because I like it. If I can also do that on top of my accounting job that keeps us alive. But yeah, anyway. So and again, it comes back to self-awareness. Like sometimes you do need a number to help check your self-awareness against. Where if it's like, I think I'm amazing, and I only have 7 views on my last 10 videos.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do a little bit of an inventory of what's the problem then.
Yeah, I'll end on this note. I often think of the movie Rudy, the football player, where everybody's like, it's so inspirational because he never gave up on his dream. And I find that very inspirational. But the thing I find most inspirational about that movie is that he didn't blindly believe that he just deserved to be out there.
Yeah.
Like he got that he was not as fast or as strong and he was tiny and all of that stuff. Like he actually took an inventory of what his shortcomings were and acknowledged that he had to work harder to get to where he needed to be. And at no point is Rudy just kind of like, I'm all in on playing Notre Dame football to the exclusion of all other things. Right? Like he's a janitor at like there, and he does take risks to get where he wants to be, but he at no point gives up on the other things or like doesn't do the things on the side. Like if anything, he works harder at those things because it gives him an opportunity to still take a shot at playing football.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think so many people get lost on is, and where the self-awareness piece I think really matters. Rudy knew he sucked at football. He was very aware of it, but he was super passionate. And so he was willing to do whatever he needed to do to play. But the awareness piece allowed him to do that because he knew that he still needed to be a janitor and have straight A's, and he had to push it. The other thing I like about that movie is the actual Rudy got in so much trouble. This is just a fun thing to look up.
Okay.
He was a shill for like a energy drink that ended up being like really bad.
That's fine.
Don't fact check me. We don't do that here.
Yeah.
But I'm 99% sure the actual Rudy got in a ton of trouble for stock market
wonderful
craziness. So, but he was passionate about it and he took it accurate inventory, and dude's in jail, I guess. Maybe not. I don't know where he is, but yeah, that's kind of my thing is the inspirational stories are great, and I think that anyone can live those stories. Anyone could do it, right? But there's a luck component to it, and you have to be the kind of person who's going to work their butt off, who is going to take every shot that they can, but also do all the stuff on the side.
Well, and also I think there needs to be an awareness of what is your I think humans. So I'll end. My note will be, if you haven't read 6 Harsh Truths, which is, as far as I know, still on Cracked by Jason Pargin, I think we as humans are generally meant to work, quote unquote. I think we are happiest when not constantly, not to the exclusion of all else, but when we have some kind of output into the world. It has nothing to do with financial stuff, but keeping in mind that an example that he uses in the article is if you are just watching Star Wars movies all day and complaining about it, your life will feel probably not super happy because you're not contributing anything. You're just sort of consuming. And he was like, if you just figured out how to make a good bowl of chili, you'll feel a lot better about your circumstances because you're, doing stuff. You don't have to make $1 million doing it, but it's just kind of and then I think it's just keeping in mind that there are things that you can do because you're passionate about them or you're interested in them, but you also have to survive a little bit. And so kind of trying to balance all of these things, which is you can do fun things that you're passionate about, try and be on the Notre Dame football team, but you also probably need to figure out how to make some money and survive too. And that's fine. Sometimes you're lucky enough to squish those into one thing, but most of the time you're not. And even if you do, it's going to make the thing that you like worse. Just trying to keep that balance of like, you don't just want to be a constant consumer and complainer. You don't want to make your sort of output in life all about survival or like getting money or whatever, which is something I kind of want to talk about at some point too. But yeah, I don't know. Self-awareness just seems to play into all of that, which is like, what are the things I actually care about? What are the things that I have some gifting in? What are the things that I am able and willing to invest in? And it's not just what's shiny or cool or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And what is the actual true cost of investing in this thing?
Right.
Like, what is this costing me to do?
Right. And am I willing to do that or pay that or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And getting out of the pod.
All right.
You boop 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 boop.